In the vast emptiness between dying suns, where the cold reaches deeper than any grave, there existed a truth that the galaxy had chosen to forget. Humanity was still alive. The Galactic Confederation's archives, crystalline repositories of knowledge spanning 12 million civilizations, contained no recent entries for the species designation Homo sapiens. The last recorded contact dated back 3 centuries, a brief, dismissive notation about a primitive bipedal species from a resource-depleted system that had failed to achieve meaningful spacefaring capability. The galaxy had moved on, but in the forgotten corners of space, on worlds deemed too hostile for civilized life, something extraordinary had taken root. Something that would have terrified the Confederation's xenobiologists had they bothered to look. On the volcanic world of Pirion 7th, where sulfur storms raged for months and the surface temperature could melt lead, human settlements thrived in the planet's hollow core. Children played in caverns lit by molten rivers, their laughter echoing through chambers carved from obsidian. They had learned to harness the planet's fury, to breathe its poison, to call its hell home. On the ice moon of Fraxis, where the atmosphere was thin enough to freeze blood in seconds, human colonies had built vast underground cities powered by geothermal vents. Hunters emerged from thermal suits to track crystalline predators across frozen wastelands, their movements a deadly dance perfected through generations of survival. On Gravitas, a world where the crushing gravity would flatten most sentient beings into paste, human miners descended into crushing depths to extract rare minerals, their bones dense as steel, their hearts pumping with the rhythm of machines. They were no longer the species that had begged for acceptance among the stars. They had become something else, something forged in the crucible of abandonment, tempered by necessity, shaped by the merciless forge of worlds that killed everything else. They had become apex predators. Admiral Korvac of the Zephyrian First Fleet discovered this truth quite by accident. The Zephyrians were elegant beings, tall, crystalline, their bodies refracting light in patterns that spoke of millennia of peaceful evolution. They had never known war, never understood violence as anything more than an abstract concept studied in their philosophical academies. Their ships moved through space like living art, graceful and serene. Korvac had been conducting a routine survey of the outer rim, cataloging dead systems for potential mining operations, when his sensors detected something impossible on Pirion 7th. Admiral, his science officer, Velanar, spoke in the harmonic tones of his species, each word a note in an alien symphony. "I'm detecting artificial structures on the surface, and life signs." Korvac's crystalline features shifted, light dancing across his translucent skin. "Impossible. The surface temperature would kill any known life form within moments." "The readings are confirmed, Admiral. Multiple settlements. Population estimated at 7 million. 7 million souls, living in hell." The first contact team descended in atmospheric suits designed to withstand the planet's fury. They found the entrance to the human city carved into the side of an active volcano, protected by energy barriers that channeled the planet's thermal output into usable power. What they found inside defied every principle of xenobiology they understood. The humans were beautiful in their adaptation. Their skin had taken on a copper hue. Their eyes gleamed with an inner fire that seemed to reflect the molten rivers flowing beneath their feet. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect environmental integration. Yet beneath that grace was something else, a coiled tension, a readiness that made Korvac's diplomatic training scream warnings. The human leader who greeted them introduced himself simply as Commander Dex Holloway. He stood barely 2 meters tall, unremarkable by galactic standards. Yet something in his bearing made the Zephyrians unconsciously step back. "Welcome to Pirion 7th, Holloway said, his voice carrying across the cavern without amplification. "Though I'm curious what brings the Confederation to our little corner of nowhere." Korvac struggled to maintain diplomatic composure. "Forgive me, Commander, but our records indicate this system was uninhabited. We had no knowledge of human presence here." Something flickered in Holloway's eyes, not surprise but a cold amusement that chilled the Zephyrian's crystalline blood. "Of course you didn't," Holloway replied. "The Confederation stopped looking for us 300 years ago, wrote us off as a failed species, left us to die on our dying homeworld while you carved up the galaxy between yourselves. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant rumble of volcanic activity, a sound that seemed to pulse in rhythm with human heartbeats. But here's the thing about humans, Admiral, Holloway continued, beginning to walk deeper into the settlement. We don't die easily, and we don't forget. The tour that followed was a revelation that shattered everything the Confederation thought they knew about survival, about adaptation, about the limits of biological possibility. The humans had not merely survived on Pyrrhion 7th, they had thrived. Their cities were marvels of engineering that worked in harmony with the planet's volcanic systems. Their children learned mathematics using equations that described lava flow dynamics. Their artists created sculptures from cooling magma. Their musicians composed symphonies that incorporated the planet's seismic rhythms. But it was in their military installations that the true scope of human evolution became clear. This is our training facility, Holloway explained, leading them through a vast cavern where humans moved through combat exercises that would have been impossible on any civilized world. They leaped between platforms suspended over pools of molten rock, their reflexes honed to superhuman precision. They engaged in hand-to-hand combat while wearing atmospheric suits that would have crushed weaker beings. Training for what? Velinar asked, his harmonic voice betraying a tremor of unease. Holloway paused beside a window that looked out onto the planet's hellish surface. In the distance, human figures could be seen moving across the molten landscape in powered armor, conducting operations that seemed to treat the planet's deadliest environment as merely another workplace. For the day the galaxy remembers we exist, he said simply. The implications of that statement would not become clear until much later. As the Zephyrian delegation prepared to leave, Korvac found himself compelled to ask one final question. Commander, what do you want from the Confederation? What would it take for humanity to rejoin galactic society? Holloway's laugh was like the sound of cooling metal, sharp, alien, and somehow predatory. Rejoin? He repeated. Admiral, you misunderstand our situation entirely. We were never part of your society. You abandoned us before we could become a threat. Now, he gestured toward the thriving city around them, toward the humans who had made a home in hell itself. Now we've become something you never imagined. Something your peaceful, civilized galaxy isn't prepared for. And what is that? Holloway's eyes met the Admiral's, and in their depths burned something that had been forged in the crucible of 3 centuries of abandonment. Survivors, Admiral. The ultimate survivors. And when survival is all you know, when adaptation is the only constant, he smiled, and there was something terrifying in its warmth. Well, you become very, very good at it. As the Zepholian ship lifted away from Pyrrhion 7, carrying news that would soon rock the foundations of galactic civilization, none aboard could shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something unprecedented. They had encountered a species that had been left to die and had instead evolved beyond their wildest comprehension. A species that had taken the galaxy's abandonment and transformed it into the very thing that would define their future. In the depths of space, on countless worlds deemed uninhabitable, millions of humans continued their daily lives, unaware that first contact had been re-established. They worked in environments that would kill other species instantly, raised families in conditions that would drive civilized beings insane, and prepared for a future that none of them could fully envision. But on Pyrrhion 7, Commander Holloway stood at his command center, watching the Zephyrian ship disappear into the star-filled void. Around him, his staff maintained the careful operations that kept their volcanic world functioning. Power distribution from thermal vents, atmospheric processors that converted sulfur compounds into breathable air, communication arrays that maintained contact with human settlements across the outer rim. Sir, his communications officer called out, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. We're receiving acknowledgments from all stations, Phoenix Base on Fraxis, Deep Core operations on Gravitas, the mining collectives in the Hadron Belt. Everyone knows the Confederation found us. Holloway nodded slowly, his mind already racing through the implications, the preparations that would need to be made, the careful plans that had been decades in the making. Send the signal, he said quietly. Across human space, on worlds that existed beyond the edge of galactic maps. A simple message began to transmit through quantum-encrypted channels that the Confederation had never learned to decode. They remember we exist. Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2. And in the silence between stars, in the forgotten corners where humanity had learned to thrive, something began to stir. Something that had been waiting patiently for 3 centuries for exactly this moment. The galaxy had abandoned humanity and moved on. Now it was humanity's turn to return the favor. But first, they would remind the civilized worlds exactly what they had left behind in the darkness, and what it had become while they weren't watching. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council convened in the Crystal Amphitheater of Nexus Prime, the administrative heart of 12 million civilizations. Representatives from 1,000 species filled the vast chamber, their varied forms creating a tapestry of biological diversity that had taken eons to evolve. At the center podium, Admiral Korvac delivered his report with the precision of a being trained in diplomatic protocol. Yet his crystalline form trembled with barely contained urgency. Honored delegates, his harmonic voice carried across the chamber. What we discovered on Pirion 7 challenges every assumption we have maintained about species extinction, environmental adaptation, and the nature of survival itself. The Meridian Ambassador, a being of flowing energy contained within a humanoid framework, pulsed with skeptical frequencies. Admiral, you speak of humans as though they represent some unprecedented phenomenon. Our archives clearly indicate they were a failed species, technologically primitive, environmentally destructive, incapable of meaningful spacefaring development. That, Korvac replied, his voice carrying undertones of something approaching fear, is precisely what makes them so dangerous. The holographic display activated, showing recordings from Pirion 7. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as images of human settlements unfolded. Cities thriving in molten hellscapes, children playing in environments that would annihilate most known lifeforms, warriors training in conditions that defied biological possibility. Chancellor Kyux Nara of the Altarian Federation, her 6-armed form rippling with bioluminescent concern, spoke into the growing silence. These readings, they suggest not merely adaptation, but evolutionary acceleration beyond any recorded parameters. Impossible, declared Prime Researcher Yithgol, the Vorthan representative, whose insectoid features clicked with dismissive skepticism. No species evolves this rapidly. Environmental adaptation requires millennia, not centuries. Unless, interrupted a new voice from the chamber's upper galleries, they were already predisposed to such adaptation. Every eye turned toward the speaker, Dr. Zalthis, the Confederation's premier xenobiologist, her serpentine form descending from the observation deck with fluid grace. As the galaxy's foremost expert on species evolution, her words carried the weight of absolute authority. Dr. Zalthis, Chancellor Krex, Nara acknowledged with formal respect. Your analysis? The xenobiologist's scaled features displayed complex patterns of concern as she accessed the chamber's central databases. 300 years ago, our first contact teams classified humans based on limited observations of their homeworld, a planet they described as unusually hostile to life. What our predecessors failed to recognize was that this hostility wasn't a limitation. The holographic display shifted, showing archived footage of Earth, not the peaceful garden world many species called home, but a planet of staggering environmental extremes, volcanic eruptions, massive storms, crushing ocean depths, temperature variations that spanned hundreds of degrees. It was a training ground, Dr. Zalthis continued, her voice carrying growing revelation. Humans evolved on a world that demanded constant adaptation, perpetual survival, endless innovation. When we abandoned them to uninhabitable worlds, we weren't condemning them to death. We were giving them exactly what they had always thrived in, environments that tested the absolute limits of biological possibility. The implications rippled through the chamber like shock waves. Species that had evolved on peaceful worlds, in stable climates, under gentle suns, began to understand what they had dismissed so casually 3 centuries ago. On Fraxis, the ice moon that registered surface temperatures of -200 degrees, Captain Alexandra Reese received the quantum-encrypted transmission in the deep thermal caverns beneath the polar ice cap. Around her, the underground city of New Geneva hummed with geothermal power, its streets carved from living ice that never melted, its buildings integrated into crystalline formations that sang with harmonic frequencies when the wind touched them. Confirmation received, she reported to the assembled colony leadership, her breath visible in the perfectly climate-controlled chamber. The Confederation knows we're live. Phase 2 protocols are now active. The assembled humans nodded with the quiet determination of people who had spent lifetimes preparing for this moment. Unlike their ancestors who had begged for acceptance among the stars, these were beings who had learned that acceptance was something you took, not something you were given. Mining operations, asked Chief Engineer Kowalski, his massive frame adapted to the moon's crushing atmospheric pressure. Triple shifts, Reese confirmed. Strip every strategic mineral from the core before they understand what we're extracting. Our advantage depends on them continuing to see us as a curiosity rather than a threat. And if they do recognize the threat, Reese's smile carried the cold beauty of the ice world that had forged her. Then we find out just how well our training prepared us for actual war. In the Crystal Amphitheater, the debate raged with increasing intensity as the full scope of human expansion became clear. Dr. Zala This presented data that shattered comfortable assumptions about galactic colonization patterns. They're not merely surviving, she explained, her analysis spreading across the chamber's quantum displays. They're systematically claiming every world we've classified as uninhabitable. Desert planets with surface temperatures exceeding 300 degrees, gas giants with crushing atmospheric pressure, asteroid fields with radiation levels that would sterilize most organic matter. They've built thriving civilizations in environments we use for hazardous waste disposal. Ambassador Faltoris, of the Hegemony Collective, his crystalline carapace, reflecting the chamber's light in nervous patterns, raised the question that had begun haunting every delegate present. How many worlds? How many humans? The data that appeared on the displays answered the question with numbers that defied belief. 1,700 colony worlds, 4 billion humans, industrial capacity that rivaled the Confederation's core systems. And all of it hidden in plain sight, dismissed as impossible, ignored as irrelevant. They've built a shadow empire, Chancellor Krexinara whispered, her bioluminescent skin flickering with patterns of fear. While we expanded into the habitable zones, they claimed everything we couldn't touch. But it was the final piece of Dr. Zelates's analysis that transformed the chamber's growing unease into something approaching panic. Their technological development has followed an entirely different paradigm than our own, she explained, her voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding. While we perfected peaceful technologies, art, philosophy, harmonious energy systems, they've spent 3 centuries perfecting survival. Their advances in materials science, energy generation, and defensive systems exceed our capabilities in every measurable category. The silence that followed was broken by a new transmission reaching the chamber from Admiral Korfak's ship still monitoring human space. Honored Council, his voice carried across the quantum link with obvious strain. We're detecting massive energy signatures from multiple human settlements. They appear to be activating something. On Gravitas, where the crushing gravity made every step a monumental effort for visiting aliens but felt like home to humans born in its embrace, Commander Rafael Santos stood in the central command bunker carved from the planet's dense metallic core. Around him, displays showed power readings that would have seemed impossible to outside observers. Primary generators online, reported his tactical officer, her movements economical and precise despite the environmental suit that allowed her to survive in the planet's dense atmosphere. Orbital platforms responding. Deep core mining operations at maximum extraction. Santos nodded, his enhanced frame moving with fluid grace, despite gravitational forces that would crush most galactic species. Signal all human colonies. It's time they understood exactly what we've been building out here, across human space, on worlds that existed beyond the boundaries of civilized understanding. Installations that had masqueraded as survival settlements began revealing their true nature. Geothermal power stations that could have powered entire star systems, mining operations that had extracted strategic materials on a scale that dwarfed galactic industries. manufacturing complexes hidden in asteroid fields, building technologies that no peaceful civilization had ever needed to develop, and weapons, technologies of war that had been born from 3 centuries of existence on worlds that tried to kill everything that lived on them. In the crystal amphitheater, the truth became undeniable as sensor readings poured in from across the outer rim. The humans had not merely survived their abandonment, they had used it to become something the galaxy had never seen before. "They're not trying to rejoin galactic civilization," Dr. Zaltis said, her analysis complete. Her conclusion as devastating as it was inevitable. "They're preparing to replace it." The transmission from Pirion 7th arrived at that moment, carrying Commander Holloway's voice across the light years with digital clarity that cut through the chamber's growing chaos. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Confederation," his words carried no trace of diplomacy, no pretense of supplication. "My name is Dex Holloway, and I speak for the 1,700 human colonies you've spent 3 centuries pretending don't exist." Every being in the chamber focused on the transmission with the intensity of prey animals suddenly aware they were being hunted. "For 300 years you've enjoyed the peace and prosperity of a galaxy where the dangerous species were safely extinct or contained. You've built your civilizations on the assumption that survival of the fittest was a primitive concept, that evolution had moved beyond the need for adaptation and struggle." Holloway's image appeared on the chamber's displays, unremarkable by galactic standards, yet carrying an authority that made chancellors and ambassadors unconsciously lean forward. "You abandoned us because we were inconvenient. Because we came from a dangerous world and carried its lessons with us. Because we represented something your peaceful galaxy didn't want to acknowledge, that sometimes the universe requires beings capable of surviving what shouldn't be survivable." The chamber's environmental systems struggled to maintain atmospheric stability, as the representatives of 12 million civilizations grappled with the implications of what they were hearing. "Now we return that favor," Holloway continued, his voice carrying the finality of avalanches, of tectonic shifts, of evolutionary leaps that could not be reversed. "We formally withdraw from galactic civilization. Effective immediately. Human space is closed to Confederation vessels. Your mining operations in the Outer Rim are terminated. Your expansion into what you call marginal systems ends now." Ambassador Feltoris found his voice first, his crystalline form resonating with outraged authority. "You cannot simply declare independence from galactic civilization. The Confederation has maintained peace for over a millennium." Holloway's laugh carried across the transmission like the sound of breaking stone. "Ambassador, you mistake our position. We're not declaring an independence from your civilization. We're informing you that your civilization now exists within the borders of human space." The tactical displays around the chamber suddenly activated, showing the true scope of human expansion. Not the handful of worlds the Confederation had imagined, but a 3-dimensional network that encompassed nearly half the galaxy's volume. Every hostile system, every dangerous region, every area deemed too hazardous for civilized development. They had surrounded the galaxy's peaceful core with a shell of worlds that could kill civilized beings simply by existing, and on those worlds they had built something unprecedented. "You have 72 hours to evacuate all Confederation personnel from human space," Holloway concluded. "After that, we assume any foreign presence represents a hostile intent." The transmission ended, leaving the crystal amphitheater in a silence that felt like the moment before a star collapsed. Chancellor Xanara's bioluminescent patterns cycled through configurations that had never been seen before. Patterns of fear so primal they predated language. "What have we done?" she whispered. Dr. Zaltis provided the answer with the clinical precision of a xenobiologist who had finally understood the true nature of evolution. "We created them," she said simply. "We took a species that had already learned to survive the unsurvivable, and we gave them 3 centuries to perfect the lesson. The greatest mistake in galactic history had been made not through malice, but through the peaceful civilization's inability to recognize that some species were not meant to be peaceful. And now, humanity was coming home. The evacuation of Confederation personnel from human space proceeded with an efficiency that would have been admirable under different circumstances. Across 1,700 worlds, alien scientists, diplomats, and mining crews gathered their essential belongings and departed for the safety of civilized space, leaving behind installations, research data, and 3 centuries of assumed galactic supremacy. But in the crystal amphitheater on Nexus Prime, the emergency session had devolved into something far less organized. Panic. The economic implications alone will destabilize half the galaxy, Chancellor Coxanara announced, her 6 arms gesticulating wildly as bioluminescent patterns of distress rippled across her skin. Those worthless systems they've claimed contain 60% of our strategic mineral reserves. Ambassador Feltoris of the Hegemony Collective clicked his crystalline carapace in patterns of growing agitation. And the technological gap. How did we miss the signs of such advanced development? Dr. Zeletis had been analyzing incoming data streams for the past 18 hours. Her serpentine form coiled around quantum computation nodes as she processed the staggering scope of human capability. Because we defined advanced by our own standards, she replied, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally shattered. We measured technological progress by aesthetic beauty, harmonic resonance, philosophical integration with natural systems. They measured it by one criterion. Does it help you survive? The holographic displays showed the true magnitude of human engineering achievements, not the graceful, artistic technologies that characterized Confederation development, but brutal, efficient systems designed for a single purpose: keeping humans alive in environments that should have killed them. Thermal extraction systems that could draw usable energy from planetary cores, atmospheric processors that could create breathable air from any chemical composition, manufacturing complexes that could build anything from base minerals extracted directly from asteroid hearts. It's not just technology, Admiral Korfak reported from his ship now stationed at the border of human space. Their entire social structure has evolved around concepts we don't understand. They don't have castes or specializations like civilized species. Every human is trained for multiple survival scenarios, cross-trained in engineering, combat, resource management, emergency medicine. Combat? The Meridian Ambassador's energy form pulsed with confusion. There has been no warfare in civilized space for 800 years. Exactly, Dr. Zaltis replied, her analysis reaching its inevitable conclusion. While we perfected the arts of peace, they perfected the arts of war. Not war against each other, war against existence itself. And now, the transmission from human space interrupted her words, carrying with it a message that would reshape the galaxy forever. Commander Holloway's image appeared in the chamber, but he was no longer speaking from the volcanic caverns of Pirion 7th. The background showed what appeared to be a massive command center, its walls lined with displays showing human settlements across the galaxy. But there was something else, other figures moving in the background. Other humans whose presence suggested coordination on a scale that defied belief. 72 hours have elapsed, Holloway announced without preamble. Confederation evacuation appears complete. We appreciate your cooperation in this transition. Chancellor Coxanara stepped forward, her diplomatic training asserting itself despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. Commander Holloway, the Confederation requests formal negotiations regarding the establishment of new territorial boundaries and trade agreements. Holloway's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested amusement at the Chancellor's attempt to apply traditional diplomatic frameworks to their situation. Chancellor, you appear to misunderstand the nature of our relationship, he replied. We're not establishing territorial boundaries. We're not interested in trade agreements. What we're doing is informing you of the new reality. The displays around him shifted, showing 3-dimensional maps of galactic space. But these weren't the familiar charts used by Confederation navigators. These showed something else entirely. Shipping lanes, resource flows, communication networks, defensive installations, the hidden infrastructure that kept galactic civilization functioning. Infrastructure that was now entirely surrounded by human space. Every supply route from the outer rim to your core worlds passes through human territory. Holloway explained with the patience of someone explaining basic principles to children. Every strategic mineral extraction operation exists within our borders. Every emergency evacuation route, every backup communication relay, every fallback position your civilizations have established, all of it exists at our discretion. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. The peaceful species of the galactic core had spent centuries expanding outward, building their civilization on the assumption that the hostile regions of space would remain empty, available for resource extraction but safely unpopulated by anything that might threaten their way of life. They had built their paradise on foundations they couldn't defend, surrounded by territories they couldn't survive in, populated by a species they had dismissed as extinct. "What do you want?" Ambassador Feltoris asked, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics of barely controlled fear. Holloway's smile carried the warmth of molten stone. "Nothing you can give us, Ambassador. We've spent 3 centuries learning to want nothing that we couldn't take for ourselves." The transmission expanded, revealing other human commanders from across their space. Each spoke from environments that would have been instantly lethal to the beings listening from the crystal amphitheater. Captain Reese from the ice moon of Fraxis, her breath visible in the Sub-Zero Command Center carved from living glaciers. "The Confederation has enjoyed the luxury of a galaxy where the dangerous places stayed empty," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known such luxury. "That era is ending." Commander Santos from the crushing gravity of Gravitas, his enhanced frame moving with casual ease in conditions that would flatten civilized beings. "Your expansion into our territory stops now. Your resource extraction operations are forfeit. Your colonies in marginal systems have 72 hours to evacuate or accept human administration." Other voices joined the chorus, human leaders from worlds that existed as legends in Confederation databases, places marked with warnings about environmental hazards that made them unsuitable for life. Each voice carried the absolute confidence of beings who had learned that unsuitable for life was merely another way of saying unsuitable for civilization. "This is impossible," Chancellor Kulsanara whispered, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through configurations that had no translation in peaceful languages. "A single species cannot simply claim control of galactic civilization." "We're not claiming control," Holloway replied, his voice carrying the finality of tectonic shifts. "We already have control. The only question is whether you choose to recognize the reality or continue operating under the illusion that your civilization exists independently of our tolerance." Dr. Zachelthis, her analytical mind still trying to process the scope of what humanity had accomplished, asked the question that cut to the heart of their situation. "What happens to the Confederation, to the 12 million civilizations that built their existence around peaceful coexistence?" For the first time, Holloway's expression softened slightly, though what replaced his confident authority was somehow more unsettling. "Doctor, peaceful coexistence is a beautiful concept, and for the right species, in the right environment, it can create remarkable civilizations. We're not interested in destroying what you built, but we're also not interested in pretending that your way of life represents the only valid approach to existence." The displays shifted again, showing not human military installations, but something else: vast construction projects on the borders between human and Confederation space. Structures that dwarfed anything in civilized databases, built with technologies that incorporated both human survival engineering and captured Confederation aesthetic principles. "We're building something new," Holloway continued. "A galaxy where peaceful civilizations can thrive under the protection of beings capable of ensuring that peace, where the dangerous work, the exploration of hostile systems, the extraction of strategic resources, the defense against threats that exist beyond the boundaries of civilized space, is handled by those equipped for such tasks." "A protectorate," Chancellor Krixensnara breathed, recognizing the concept from ancient historical archives. "Partnership," Commander Santos corrected from Gravitas. "Your civilizations continue to exist as they always have, pursuing art, philosophy, scientific advancement, cultural development. Our civilizations handle everything else, the parts of existence that require beings capable of surviving what shouldn't be survivable." The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Korfak's voice from the border of human space, his crystalline form trembling with the effort of processing information that challenged every assumption he had ever held about galactic civilization. "Admiral," his science officer could be heard reporting in the background, "the energy signatures from human installations. They're not just defensive systems. They're construction projects. Massive ones. And they're building an ambassador. You need to see this." The transmission from Korfak's ship showed long-range scans of human space. But the familiar planets were now accompanied by something unprecedented. Artificial structures on a scale that defied belief. Orbital rings around hostile worlds, space-based habitats and asteroid fields, massive installations that connected entire star systems with networks of impossible engineering. How long? Dr. Zalathis asked, her xenobiologist's mind racing to understand the timeline required for such construction. 3 centuries, Holloway replied simply. The same 3 centuries you spent perfecting diplomatic protocols and philosophical frameworks. We spent perfecting the ability to build anything, anywhere, regardless of environmental limitations. The scope of human achievement became clear in that moment. While the Confederation had expanded into habitable worlds and built civilizations designed for peace and beauty, humanity had claimed the entire dangerous backbone of the galaxy and transformed it into something that could support any conceivable form of existence. They hadn't just survived their abandonment. They had used it to become the foundation upon which all other civilizations would now rest. The choice before you is simple, Holloway concluded, his image now joined by dozens of other human commanders from across their impossible empire. Accept the new reality and work with us to build something greater than either of our civilizations could achieve alone, or continue to operate under the illusion that peaceful species can maintain galactic civilization without the foundation that makes such peace possible. And if we refuse? Ambassador Feltoris asked, his crystalline form resonating with defiant harmonics. The answer came not from Holloway but from Captain Reese on her ice world, her breath visible in the Sub-Zero command center as she spoke with the casual authority of someone stating obvious facts. Then you discover exactly what happens when civilizations that evolved for peace encounter civilizations that evolved for war. The transmission ended, leaving the crystal amphitheater in a silence that felt like the moment before evolution took another irreversible step forward. Chancellor Trixin Nara looked around the chamber at the representatives of 12 million peaceful civilizations, each struggling to process the transformation of their entire universe in the span of a few days. What do we do? She asked. Her question directed not at any specific individual but at the fundamental nature of existence itself. Dr. Zalathis provided the answer with the clinical precision of a xenobiologist who had finally understood the true nature of galactic evolution. We adapt, she said simply. Just like they did. Just like all successful species do when the environment changes. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of peaceful expansion was ending, replaced by something unprecedented, a symbiosis between civilizations that had perfected peace and civilizations that had perfected survival, and in the space between the stars, on worlds that had once been deemed too hostile for life. Humanity continued the work they had been doing for 3 centuries. Building, adapting, surviving, preparing for whatever challenges the universe might present to beings who had learned that the only constant in existence was change, and the only guarantee was that those who could adapt would inherit whatever came next. The apex predators had returned home, and the galaxy would never forget them again.